Let me invite, with all my respect, Dr. Bibhudutta Baral. Sir, if you could kindly come to the stage. Mr. Siddharth Ravishankar, Chief Gaming Officer, Galaxy Racer. Mr. Goutham Dindukurthi is a founder of the Holy Cow Productions. Mr. Rohit Jagasia, who is a founder of the Revenant Esports. Would request Mr. Siddharth Ravishankar if you are here.
Because essentially you're killing a lot of creatives by constantly only funding one aspect of a very, very, very diverse industry. To give you an anecdote, for example, it would be like what if all like everything we know as the Indian film industry, whether Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, all of it put together. What we have all these diverse industries making diverse movies, but everybody only made horror genre movies. Like there was no other genre that's ever made, right? 99% of the movies, any of these, your Bollywoods, Tollywoods, Bollywoods put out a horror genre, right? And in a world of moviegoers, that is not something we would accept. So, but the thing is that sort of become a status quo in the game development world, where we are largely okay with significant amounts of capital. I would argue even upwards of $500 million being dropped into people recycling the same product. Like, hey, I've made my own version of Ludo, I've made my own version of Rummy, but the important part is it's monetizable and I'm able to, generate cash from day one. So again, due to that monetizability, there's a lot of people running there where I would argue a lot of diamonds in the rough are getting left out. Potentially the next Call of Duty is being made in India. Potentially the next GTA is being made in India. These are all multi-billion dollar IPs. Like, anytime a Call of Duty game releases, their bad revenues is them doing $2.5 billion in a fiscal cycle. So those kind of we need to recognize that this field is that diverse and that kind of potential does exist within this country. Like how we did with tech. At one point, we were reliant on your Twitters and your Facebooks of the world. Then suddenly you had a Ola to compete with an Uber. You had unique companies like Zomato and Swiggy come out where the model has now been globally copied, and there's like, for example, DoorDash is a big unicorn that has largely seen Swiggy and Zomato's work and emulated. So we need to start approaching the gaming industry like that and start enabling like these people. I understand that your real money gaming and those things work and they happen, and there is a market for it. Great, continue to support because they're gamers too. So you continue to support them, but don't double down everything on them. Recognize that tomorrow's GTA or tomorrow's Call of Duty can't come out of India. We need to find a way to basically enable these industries by pushing capital there. Because at the end of the day, as long as the capital is there, the rest of the enablement that you're asking for will happen naturally. If capital is there, a company will have more resources to go hire people, right? Like I know a lot of game dev companies right now, which is just purely the dev team, right? And they are looking for funding to scale their operations and things like that. But at the same time, they have the struggle that we don't know any marketing guys who have experience working in gaming. We don't know any biz dev guys who have experience working in gaming. We don't know any, so and that list just keeps going on. But at some point, if there is enough capital, like once you, like for example, you have a couple of these marquee hires and marquee moves happening, right? Like a CMO of a large FMCG going and becoming a CMO of a local publisher or something like that. I think once like those kind of moves were made, it will give a larger exposure to the industry as well. Like for example, if a CMO of a group like a Group M or a publicist goes and joins an indie, a local developer who's making a made in India game, that's huge corporate news, right? Because that gives hope down the chain as well. That hey, if XYZ company has the that money to offer this guy, and his package is what 2-3 crores a year, they're able to bring him in and generate that amount of value. That means that internship that I'm looking for, or that entry level job that I'm looking for, or that mid-tier job that I'm looking for, it exists. It's there. It's funded. It's not something where I have to go, I apply for the job, and it's an internship until it's not an internship. And that's sort of the current nature of the ecosystem. And I would argue that's purely because of how your capital has been dispersed and due to the sort of very, not, I wouldn't say wrong, but very limited definition of what we have as gaming in this country.
Got your point. Thanks for your point, Siddharth. So my next question to Mr. Goutham Dindukurthi, who is the founder of the Holy Cow Productions. So if I taking the cue from what Siddharth mentioned, that it's not the gap in the skills. Skills are there. We are probably making some of the hairs and that kind of dresses and all these things. But again, it is coming to the market as a banner of a foreign company. Now, if we have the skill at least to that extent, what do you think? I mean, if we know how to do it, can we also try the localization of it? I mean, India is a country with diverse culture. If you see Northeast, there is a separate culture. Go to the North, separate culture. Go to the South, separate culture. And all these different socio-cultural communities are there. How we can make the game more personal, more localized by taking, it's not only about language, but beyond language, the complexion, the culture, the ornaments, it's beyond that. How we can make this game, ye to mera game hai, kind of. What's your thought process on this?
No, I think that's a very good point actually. Localization is very useful and helpful in like.
Yeah, I think your voice is not.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was saying like localization is quite helpful to build that industry, or like if you take India as an example, if you want more people playing the games, yes, of course, it's nice to see games in your own native languages, and it's beyond language, exactly like you said. So if we're taking inspiration from Indian elements, you're bringing your cultural elements to the games. It's definitely being done right now. You already see a few games that have been released or in production across India. But I think the entire thing comes down to the audience, or if they are playing such games, right? So if you look at games like your Ludo and all those crop of games, they are already doing the localization and it is being consumed. I think that's mostly going to be driven by the audience. If there is an audience for that particular language, it will be done. If you look at Asian video game companies, they do publish it in their own languages as a front runner language when they launch it, right? But it does definitely, I feel like it comes down to if there is an audience for it. But in general, doing it is, I feel personally, will be very good because it will act as a drive for people to play games, maybe even PC console games, starting to have these languages and representation of our culture. It will be really cool. But only thing I would say is it has to be done in a proper way, because the global audience will not understand immediately what context of India is, right? So the core game has to be good, whatever you do. And then if you're adding elements of Indianness, or the game is set in India and then you see some characters speaking in those languages, or you see some of the behavior of those characters, I feel that's the best way to go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Dindukurthi. Let me go to Mr. Rohit Jagasia, who is the founder of Revenant Esports company. I have a quick question for you, Rohit. If I say that in India there are penetration, and at least by virtue of the mobiles and the other things, we have almost a 500 million gamer in India, and in majority, obviously, the casual gamers. There was a study done, and that study says that 60% of hardcore gamers are spending roughly as 3 times more than the casual gamers are paying for a game, in a freemium kind of thing or premium kind of thing setup. And this is also true, that number of hours that they are investing in a game as well. Now, converting a casual gamer to a hardcore gamer, it has a direct impact that overall revenue this industry can generate. Because for every $1 for industry, it is $500 million. Now, for this conversion, do you see that this conversion, a gaming company can do it alone, or it has to be a ecosystem play? And in case this is an ecosystem play, who, as per you, should take the primary responsibilities?
Thank you for your question. So I firstly, I'd like to start with, gaming overall, esports mainly is a spectator sport in the country. Obviously, because you know what, Jio also did in the country. Mobile data plans are the cheapest in the country. The penetration to gaming is increased. We've seen a big sort of, rise in casual gamers. But also, there was a study that was done where 70% of the people who watch games are actually casual gamers, who watch their hardcore gamers or, the esports athletes play. I think in order to, increase in-app purchases, if that is, that's how I understood the question. If in order to increase in-app purchases, I think it is a play of the entire ecosystem and not only a certain stakeholder in the community. Like, for example, with what Valve did, with Counter-Strike. So Valve owns Steam, which is, like a whole game library where, you can buy games, skins and everything to Counter-Strike. And they build a whole microeconomy around, products and, in-game items that you can sell. And generally, hardcore gamers do buy it a lot because they are generally seen on, streams where, cosmetically their character looks better, or, there is some sort of in esports, there's no advantage when you're buying a skin or doing an in-app purchase. But yeah, from a cosmetic point of view, it does make sense. But otherwise, I think, in order to have, spending increase in the ecosystem, I think esports and gaming has to get bigger in the country. Casual gamers would, I also still don't know how would casual gamers would probably, purchase cosmetics, but generally it is more like, if you compare it to a traditional sport, when they see Virat Kohli wearing a certain sort of a wrist brand or something, and, people go and generally buy it. So I think it'll take time. It will happen for sure. Because if you take like a normal comparison with the West, I think a monthly sort of in the West, people spend around $100 to $150 on in-app purchases. But in India, because we are still 7 to 8 years behind them.
Yeah, it's roughly $20. Yeah. 130, 140 is the global standard average.
So I think it'll take time, and I think it's not a single stakeholder in the ecosystem that could make a play towards this, but it has to be a collective play. And I think eventually it will increase. And I think also the disposable income is very low, in India. Plus the people who play games are generally college going students. So, I think again, accessibility to credit cards, UPI and everything is also a big question mark. So until all of those factors outside the gaming industry are also sorted, that's when we'll probably see a rise in, the spending power of casual gamers.
Thanks, Rohit, for your feedback. So I have one more question for Sir. We talked about one side of it, like how together we can build the skilled resources who are the skilled gamers, game developers. Now the other side of it, this is something that institutional tie-up is there, required government formation, government support is needed to build those skilled resources who can be absorbed and can develop the games. The other side of it, how game or gamification can be leveraged as a powerful tool for teaching. There are few edtech players like Prodigy. They have started this particular thing. They are using games as a powerful medium, and especially for the young adults and the kids, right, of the adolescence age who are very familiar with the gaming, and they are leveraging it to gain their attention span and then teach them by through some interactions. So what is your viewpoint, sir? Do you think this other way, I mean, using gaming for teaching, whether it will be a success from Indian context, keeping the Indian context in mind, or you have some other thought process? That's for you, sir.
Should I go?
Yes.
This is almost established fact that video games or gaming has been successfully utilized, implemented in educational sector and in teaching school sciences, and it's a huge market also, and also a teaching aid, a support system for the teachers. And in that case, game here it can be used as a learning tool, but depends upon what is the purpose with the client. Suppose you are a startup or a company and your client is NCRT and they are requiring some games to teach Newtonian mechanics or school science related to mechanics and how to make it easy, or mathematics or some algebra or whatever. In that case, it's possible. It is games are not only of recreational pastime or only for entertainment. Games also, while playing, it engages the cognitive system, the entire cognitive system. In some games, sometimes it depends upon what is the type of games, what kind of games, and it involves not only the entire cognitive resource, all the apparatuses. Sometimes you get into a flow experience because it's fully engaged. The sensory apparatuses are shut from the outside world. You get that flow experience, So we can see that game has impact on the cognitive system, means it has impact on the neuronal architecture, the neuron assembly, the way they are connected, and also the glandular and hormonal secretions. You know that serotonin, you know adrenaline, all these things. So in that case, why can't it be used as a learning and then used in education or learning, teaching at that segment? It can be, surely. And also the popular perception of game has changed. Earlier it used to be considered as only for entertainment. Now lots of research, lots of evidences have emerged accumulated in the last couple of years, that playing games, certain type of games has certain type of impact. Playing games will enhances cognitive skills. Gaming enhances decision making and problem solving skills. Gaming also enhances your, you can say, visual spatial, particularly wayfinding and navigational skills, and there is no end to it. If this is so, why can't you think of making games which will address the issue of dyslexia, which will teach social cognition to autism, and also why not it is as a mechanisms to create games which involve decision making, planning, reasoning, and that particular game while playing, it may delay the onset of dementia, Alzheimer's, or maybe if these are motoric and high motor coordination, it may delay the onset of Parkinson also. So I mean there is enough, and we received the delegation from NIMANS, National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. They want that after the trauma, the injury, brain injury, the post surgery, the recovery period is taking years. Then they said that for physical, if you have injured legs and whatever, that is physiotherapy and whatever, it's a science and it helps you to recover faster. But whatever the brain after the surgery, trauma, it takes time, 2 years, 3 years. So can there be games which will quicken the process of recovery or facilitate? They are ready to pay, invest some money. I mean, through games also, it is possible to earn a lot of money. But it should be, the ecosystem should be that mature that there are places for all kind of this kind of stuff. So I believe it is a learning, definitely.
Thanks, sir. I will go to Mr. Siddharth. For you, the question is this, that esports industry is gradually getting traction in Indian market. And players are also getting contractual agreements are there with the different esports athletes. So there's a new term has been coined, like there's sports athletes, they say esports athletes. So what is your viewpoint? I mean, at the end of the day, and in fact, India is also participating in different Olympics organized for the esports, and so it is another sector which is growing significantly. So, what is your viewpoint that as an esports organization, esports company, how you see or how you feel the problem of these esports athletes that they are facing in sharpening their skills, in sharpening their career, focusing towards esports as their career? What is your thought process? How what are the major challenges that they are feeling, and how you as a esports company and obviously the similar esports companies can support to reduce the kind of a burden, reduce the kind of a challenges that these individual esports athletes are facing?
So I think I'd like to answer your question in a couple of parts. It's more of to start off, to give you a context of the esports industry right now, as heavily as it is growing in the amount of capital that's being put into it. There are two nascent problems which have not been solved till date. Now, number one would be that there is no formal sense of regulation or any formal framework that is associated to this industry, or that, for example, myself or Rohit as a business owner can call upon to get help from the government, so to speak. For example, labor laws, right? Like the contract I'm under, the contract you're under. If our companies come and misbehave with us, right? There are certain provisions and whatever rights and things like that that protect you and me. And the same way, there are certain rights and provisions that protect the company if you and I misbehave. But like, for example, with how esports contracts are structured today, considering they are structured more like a sports contract, but that same level of regulatory authority like a sports is not, and and the double click of it, like taxation laws and so on and so forth, how endorsing by a sports person works, and etc. etc. Due to that not being there, and you're largely talking about an industry that has only globally itself been around for the last 10, 11 years, like at least properly funded. And in this country, I'd argue it's even younger. It's been like at least half the time, about 4, 5 years only. So you're talking about an industry where largely it's completely untrained individuals who are going into management and leadership positions. Now, you're essentially talking about 18, 19, 20-year-olds going and becoming CEOs, head of business development, a marketing head, with not necessarily having the soft skills that they need to. And it's also unfortunate with the industry being, at least in its early phase, it's stopped now with more media recognition and more traditional forms of capital investment coming in. But unfortunately, with how our country runs at the early stage, esports was being like player contracts and things like that were being used to whitewash money as well. Where in the early days, I have a couple of stories from players where they sign a contract and the boot camp that they're in, the guy is paying fully with cash, and at the end of the month, there's a duffel bag with envelopes with everybody's name written on it coming home, and that's how they used to get paid their salaries. And so I would argue that, so on one side it's about the ecosystem itself being more professional, and I think that would come in as more corporate structures come in, like non-poaching, like two companies agreeing on a non-poaching structure, and there also being more, and the other side is more regulation, so to speak. Now there's regulation that needs to come from two sides. One is of course the government with letting us know, okay, do we follow normal labor laws? Do we follow sport labor laws? And like, is there any precedent that I can use for a violation of an esports contract that a player can use against an organization, or an organization can use against a player to penalize them? Like, for example, if you were to go sell proprietary information of your company there's an entire process by which you can be penalized and potentially lose your career. But there are stories in the Indian esports industry where that has not happened. Where and you need to compare it definitely to sport. In sport, you'll never see a Virat Kohli going and signing a contract with Delhi and just messaging Bangalore and saying, "Hey, I'm leaving my contract. I'm going to be playing from Delhi Capitals from tomorrow." And you'll never see a Delhi going and approaching a Virat and also trying to talk to him without getting Bangalore's consent, right? So, but these kind of practices are wide in the esports ecosystem. Again, number one, there's no support in terms of a regulatory framework from the government and the law-making side. And number two, neither is the support or the hygiene necessarily laid down by the publisher of the specific game, who will essentially act like your federation or a body like a BCCI or a FIFA, where that publisher is sitting and saying, "Hey, you are using my intellectual property to fuel your career. So under the structure of that intellectual property, ABC is okay. DEF you cannot do." Like, for example, Riot does do that. There are certain, especially in the League of Legends ecosystem where it's fully franchised and now within Valorant as well, the players not only have to sign a contract with me as a team owner, but they will also have to sign a sort of terms of service and terms and conditions with Riot to be an existing pro player within their ecosystem and to enjoy the benefits of being a pro player in the ecosystem. So I'd argue it's more of this, that the industry definitely has potential and it's great, right? But it's also heavily misguided, which is it's growing, yes, but is it necessarily growing in the right direction? I wouldn't say so.
Thanks for the thoughts, Siddharth. I know we are a bit little over time, so I'll take 10 more minutes to close this particular round, and probably we'll take one or two points from the audience. Okay. So for you, Mr. Goutham, we see there is a growth in gamers, casual gamers primarily. But if we see parallelly, the CAGR for the PC console-based gaming is fairly static. It's moving even less than a percentage. In some cases, it is even declining as well. But this is not the picture. If I see the other markets like US market or South Korea's or Japan's, it's not the picture. There is a steady growth there as well. So what is your thought process? What is behind this such of, even though that's a gaming industry is moving at a 22%, or even last year it was 32% CAGR, what is the hindering this growth of this console-based gaming or a hardware-based gaming, and which basically a kind of the hardcore gamers are majorly play? So what's your take on this?
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of the points was already said by Mr. Ravishankar. I think it's the purchasing power of people that is going to come into consideration, where gaming is a luxury, especially if you're talking about console and PC gaming. It is a luxury item, a luxury entertainment kind of thing. So one is obviously the pricing of the hardware, which is a little higher if you compare to other countries. So if the pricing matches the international pricing, there is a little small chance that there will be more people buying consoles. But in general, I think as a market, it's India, we've not been heavy on that, like accessibility to mobile devices and general to the free-to-play games. That's easier for more people to buy and to play and consume that content. So that is going to be the nature. But having said that, I think at some point it is going to transition into PC and console, because with the mobile industry, like there's only so much you can offer in terms of content, like you were mentioning GTA or COD, right? So all of those games are more enjoyed when you play it on a bigger screen on consoles, and the performance and the hardware that comes for it. Yeah, I think it is going to take time. It's not something that's going to change overnight here, but it is getting there. Like with esports, especially with Valorant and all the other games that are being popular right now, the direction is there. I don't know as an industry what we can do specifically for the growth in India. I think it's just going to happen over time.
Thanks, Mr. Goutham. So my last question as a moderator to the from the forum to Mr. Rohit Jagasia. esports, I think we are talking about esports and you are also into esports. So there are institutional collaboration is happening. I mean, if I give an example, that Asia Pacific Institute of Technology, they are teamed up with the Esports Malaysia to come up a kind of a esports focused events and the training curriculums, all these things. In India, I know there's Mogo is doing it with Somaya Vidya Vihar University. So it's also, in fact, done I think last year around October or November only. So what you see, this particular trend, this teaming up between the universities with the esports. So how you see this? Do you think this is a value adding from Indian context, or how you see you want to see that whether this will grow in future, and or this is something is not suitable for the Indian context in mind?
So I think, I mean, there's no question about it not being suitable. It's very, very suitable. Ideally, I think esports, you should just do an apple-to-apple comparison between sport and esports. It's almost the same thing. It's just that sport is played in an offline capacity. Esports gives you that mileage where you can play it in a virtual capacity, also in an offline capacity. I think cricket viewership also in IPL is going down right now. That's why it was broadcasted for free this time. It was accessible to everyone. But with that being said, even brands, IPL teams, as a matter of fact, they are all looking at esports very closely, because it's very easy for them to build brand advocates, because the people who play esports actually come from the age bracket of 12 to say 28, and people over 28 to 34 just watch games because of the whole nostalgia factor. So I think esports curriculums, academies, and everything has already been a very big scene in Korea, and in the other places in the world now. Like you said, Malaysia is starting something. There's something happening in Madhya Pradesh also recently that I came across. So I mean, the way sports also grew from the grassroots, I think it's the same play that should happen for esports. And at the end of the day, it's another economy being built in the country where, like a traditional sports team or a sports company or a sports league, there is more employment that comes in. India also has access. It's become the second largest smartphone market in the world now. So I think it's only good for all the industries cumulatively if, universities also start taking it seriously and, basically grow esports from the grassroots.
Thank you. With this, I have if anybody from the audience wants to ask any question to this esteemed panel.
Thank you. Professor talked about certain kind of games like which can increase cognitive skills and also the decision making abilities, and also games which can delay the onset of Parkinson's. I mean, these are some awesome benefits of I think the gaming scenario itself. I would request the other members of the panel who are directly representing the industry just to throw light on what is the current scenario in these areas. Is there anything happening? Otherwise, what is the thought process behind this? Like Professor also indicated that there can be a revenue model. Like, if something can delay Parkinson's, obviously doctors may be, very happy to prescribe playing such kind of a game for the potential patients also. So I would like to know what is the thought process behind this. And I have another question also. What would your advice, or what would your suggestion or advice be to a youngster who is looking for a career in gaming industry? Okay, what do you think would be the chances, and what would be the suggestions you would give? Thank you.
Yeah, to answer your first question, I think it needs to be split into two parts. So there's the entire just general advantages of gaming. I think I can give you this from a more personal perspective, having been someone who's been playing video games regularly since the age of 3. So there's definitely some warrants to just. I'm not talking about your education-based games and things like that. There's definitely some warrants to games in general where you do develop certain soft skills due to the nature of games, for example. Like I think Rohit is someone who can attest to this really well, but I'm aware that he's also a competitive player, and I used to play competitive games as well. But I would definitely argue, and I think Rohit would agree that a lot of our today as leadership in companies, our team building skills, our communication skills, our ability to just be thrown into a room with 5 random people and be able to work with them. I think we're fairly comfortable in those environments, and we have those skills purely because of the hundreds of hours we've spent playing Counter Strike or Dota with our friends growing up, and getting shouted at by our parents saying, "Hey, there's no like, there's nothing to benefit off of this," and things like that. But I would argue that even academically, the fact that I was playing games did give me a certain edge. Like I learned how to speed read because of playing games. Because in certain old text-based games, you'd have the dialogues and things like that just coming as prompts on the screen, and it wouldn't stay on the screen for more than 2 to 3 seconds. So you have to learn how to read an entire sentence or potentially a paragraph within 2 to 10 seconds, so to speak. So it does develop other skills like that for you. And as Sir said, there's definitely the motor skill part of it also, where anecdotally, how I can compare it to you is all of my friends who are historic gamers have had less road accidents than the people who are not. Simply put, that's it. Why? Because their hand-eye coordination is better, their reaction times and their reaction speeds are better. They're able to absorb a lot more information from the concept of peripheral viewing and things like that, which again is something. It's skills you fine-tune by constantly being in a fast-paced, like a high competition environment, and that's essentially what being in a game is. Like loading into a game of Counter Strike, that's what it is. Like it's teaching you multiple soft skills in life. You're being taught how to work with 4 random strangers. You're being taught how to communicate with 4 random strangers, and in certain cases where 2 to 3 other people don't even speak the same language that you do. So you only have like certain like fixed keywords to go off of, saying go to this part of the map, or bomb is there, or this person is in gully or something like that. You only have you literally have to learn to communicate in an entire movement or an entire coordination by only using 2 or 3 keywords, and that too within essentially a couple of seconds. Because if you don't react at the right time, then you lose your timing and things like that. So there's definitely a set of skills that are there to be learned, and I think video games have been ostracized for a long time due to cultural reasons, but games in learning is something that has existed in human history for decades. I mean, either you as children, or if you have children, or I remember definitely as a kid, I was taught association by being given that game where you have the multiple colored shapes and you have to put the shape through the hole. At the end of the day, that's a game. That's a game you're giving to the kid to keep them entertained, but at the same time, you're able to build those cognitive associations that this is a square, this is a circle, this is a star shape, this is a square shape, and so on and so forth. So it's games being used in education is something that's been there forever. I think with the technology, with just in general technology advancing, we've seen advancements. That's where what Sir was speaking about comes in. Where I personally have worked with a company where they're working on a project to develop games to assist with motor functions of heavily autistic children. So we're talking about cases of autism where they're affected to the extent where sometimes their bones and stuff are also, they have additional issues, secondary genetic effects or something, which cause their motor abilities to reduce, which potentially causes their autism to increase, so to speak. So these guys are tackling that entire process through by creating a specific game which is enjoyable for the user, but it essentially, in how the game plays out and that custom controller that they're building for it, this person with this specific issue will be doing, or in terms of interacting with the game, will be doing all the physio exercises that they're required to do on a regular basis to fight these problems. So
Nintendo gesture-based motion.
yeah, so those gesture-based and things like that are also coming, where there's certain
the muscles.
yeah, so there's certain companies exploring it as a tool of communication as well. So I think it's a very broad topic. I think saying gaming in education is something new is wrong, because it's again existed. I mean, Monopoly has been around since the 1960s at the very least, and Monopoly is how I learned, how my father taught me the basics of finance. Like saying, look, this is how the larger world works, and this is how money goes around and things like that.
One thing, sir. he spoke a particular word very important, that cognitive association. It is all about conditioning. If P, then Q. If they happen together a lot of time, only P can bring Q. It is just like, that is a saying in neuroscience, neurons, if they fire together, they wire together. So it is all about conditioning. It's a behavioral impact. So I think in Western countries, many of the university design programs, they receive lot of money from government for this purpose or that purpose. If you get anybody who knows Microsoft Flight Simulator, lot many people are using it for purpose of understanding the flight. Same with also possessive games like America Army has, that is American Army. That's a game. But while playing, you'll get to know what is the life and ethos in the American Army, and that will also indirectly motivate you to join. So it's just like that. Games are, it depends on how you make it.
Yes, and
We are not ready yet. Other countries are ready.
maybe someday, you can't say, maybe it's possible, but we're not there today necessarily. But again, with the advent of technology, you don't know what's going to, like 5 years back, you couldn't imagine just waking up in the morning and then 2 minutes later all the groceries you wanted are there in your house, right? So I think with the advent of technology and how, again, significantly technology has been evolving with even Moore's law going out the window, it's something that will eventually happen once, as Sir mentioned, the right amount of capital and innovation is, if the focus basically there's the more focused innovation you have, the quicker you're going to see it.
So one game our department has released last year, our client was Election Commission. They wanted us to make a game for 14 to 16, 17 years. By playing it, when they will be 18, they will be very much, behaviorally had to vote, right? It is there in the Election Commission website, and we got around 20 lakhs to make that game, and it is very well accepted also. So we want more the clients. It is very rarely government people come and so maybe we get more.
Any other point?
I have a question. We are a game design college, and one is that a lot of gamers are there, but then when it comes to the game development, so there is hardly any awareness among the students, and during 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, till that they do hardly any special, even sketching, drawing, for example, for character design and all. So Indian parents do not allow them to spend so much of time. Now, the other question is that it's basically probably will change over the period of time, but then when it comes to law enforcement, IP Act and all that, so the target audience who is playing the games as well as who is developing the games is in the age of, it's a teenage generally when they start developing the interest. So don't you think so? The cultural restrictions and legal restrictions which you were talking about, I'm asking Ravi sir, that the restrictions which are going to put, don't you think so it's going to be making it very scary for a game developer at such an age? What properties I'm going to use for developing my game? Will it put me into any trouble when it comes to a legal issue? And they have hardly any knowledge about that, number one. And number two, cultural restrictions, because I have just subscribed to some of the channels which gives you feed on new games or different games. So this target audience, which is a teenage, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years of age, generally, most of the players. So they are also served some content in the name of gaming, which is adult content. The characters are designed in a way where they look not aligned with the when it comes to wrestling or kind of such games. So these kids are prone to such content many times, you know that. So what would be the balance of these two, and how parents will encourage their kids to subscribe to such feeds, as well as developers at such an age are not going away from developing, because there is a lot of legal restrictions around using the properties and using the assets available online.
No, so okay. I think I need to answer your question in a couple of parts. So there's the first entire education aspect to it. Now it boils back to what I had mentioned earlier, that at the end of the day, they like amongst the masses, there still isn't a proper understanding of the industry and what all factors come into culminate to make this industry. Like, you haven't had anybody come and say, hey, I'm dropping $200 million on a game that's being made in India, and the full music, like the entire music of the game is being done by AR Rahman, right? So that those kind of crossovers and things are potentially there, because at the end of the day, the music component of a game is also very integral and important to the experience. But at the same time, you haven't had someone who's come and do that, where on the flip side, the game that I mentioned, Elden Ring, before, the story of the game is written by George R.R. Martin, the same writer as Game of Thrones. So that's first, I'd say a first step is to recognize that this is a very vast industry that has, if you want to boil it down from a HR metric, has multiple departments in which people can work in, right? Like you have your creatives, you have your back office people, you have your data and your, pure tech guys, you have your marketing guys, you have your pure art guys, you have, and a couple of very niche skill sets that are required to this industry. Now the problem with that is a large association is in India is, okay, it's games is tech is engineering. So a lot of kids are told that if you want to become a game designer, you go first get a computer science engineering degree, then write a GRE, then go to a US, do a master's in game design, but it has to only be from an MIT or a DigiPen Institute or one of the premier cream colleges, and then you go work for an Activision or a Riot or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, that's again, first of all, very restrictive thinking, because number one, that path is not a path of least resistance, and it's at the end of the day a very capital intensive path. And the second thing I would argue is that we're also in a phase in the world where such traditional methods of education are going out the window, and I think tech is a large showcase of that. Like for example, internationally, especially in Europe and North America, if you look at it, some of the leading blockchain experts who are being hired by companies like BCG, Blackwater, and all for hundreds of thousands of dollars for a couple of months of a project or something, are all kids under the age of 22 who either just finished high school or dropped out of high school itself, right? Because they may have been so far ahead of their education process that they just sat at home and learned everything. In the recent Spider-Man movie, the new Miles Morales one, there's an entire sequence which was a sequence of fights and the multiverse interaction, where that sequence was fully designed and animated by a 16-year-old kid from the United States. So, and these are all, again, this, when asked where did he get the proficiency of this software to have the same level of skill as a guy who's been sitting 30 years at a Disney or whatever XYZ. He's like, when I was a kid, my parents bought me a computer. This is what I was curious about. I went and learned it. And eventually, someone found me, they gave me the job, I did it. And so I did the job well, they paid me money. So I think there's that large disruption in education that's coming in as well. So you're right, on one side, there's the entire cultural aspect of it. But I think we're also in a phase where a lot of people are breaking out of their shells and getting educated in anything and everything they wanted. Traditional forms of education are more limited to things like where you need certification and proof that you're actually aware and a sort of like a thought leader. So that'd be more things like becoming a CA, where you need to be recognized by a government body, becoming a doctor, where you have to have a medical license where somebody says this guy is capable of handling and potentially saving a life. But for things like marketing, social media, all of that, I would argue people are largely educating themselves online. Like for example, me by education, I'm an engineer, but I'm sitting here and working with making games, making media IPs and esports. I didn't learn how to make a TV content series sitting in an engineering college. I learned it by either doing the work myself or going onto a YouTube, accessing resources online and learning it. So I think that disruption in education is also a large factor to be considered.
Now, questions are really interesting, I know, but with interest of the time, I know that we need to leave the stage for the next event. But no worries, sir, I understood that you have some question. So our panels are anyway there, so you can ask the question offline as well. But probably with interest of the next event, which is already scheduled. we need to close this particular session, but I'm really, I can feel the, on the basis of the type of questions and the interest, I can feel that the interest that we able to together generate with the support from the esteemed panel here. So thanks panel for your time and for the insights that you shared. It's really a kind of a awesome insights into this industry together.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.